I chose this topic because I really feel that people who dare to dream tend to achieve greatness or great things. My definition, or actually the way I see it, is that if you can dream it, you can achieve it. Provided, though, you work hard and consistently, you stay focused and never give up. And I looked at many people's way of interpreting the topic. And one of those was Katie Morton, who says, dream big, act consistently, and the universe will conspire to make you achieve your dream. It's quite similar, except that in her description, you also need the universe to conspire, which I agree with. And in my view, there are a few steps that you actually need to fulfill to reach your dream or your dreams. The first one is defining your dream. For me, it was quite at an early age that I defined my dream. And when I attained that dream, I actually had another dream. So you don't have to have one dream. Once you've defined it, you want to commit to that dream. Because if you don't commit to it, then it will remain a dream and you'll never achieve it, in my view. And then you need to action your goals by working hard, staying consistent, and never giving up. You actually have so many people talking about the pulling head down syndrome. But if you actually have a positive attitude, a positive outlook, you actually look at others and learn from their successes, and you get inspired by those successes. And never give up. That has been my motto, and it continues to be that even at this age. And when I look around the room, I think I'm one of the oldest, including Prof. I actually liked this quote by Henry Ford, where he says, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. So it's all in the mind. If you think you can, you will. If you think you can't, you won't. So it's very important what you actually tell your mind. I had the privilege for my doctoral thesis to interview quite a few influential women. And for the book, I increased that because we live in a society that has men and women. And from the outcome of the thesis, one of the things that came out is what is quite important, because men are in charge. If you are to change anything, you need their influence, you need their buy-in. So what I'm saying in terms of the factors required to succeed are not just women, women's views, but also the men that I interviewed for the book. One of the first things is ambition. In my view, in order for you to dream, you start with an ambition. And that's why you are able to have those dreams. And hard work is the support that allows you to achieve those ambitions. And resilience, I cannot emphasize this more. Based on the failures that I came across in my life, and I'm sure each one of us has had some failures along the way, but it's actually the grit that allows you to sustain your dream and your ambition. And you learn from those failures. It's important that you do, because they are there to teach you something. You never learn from the successes, but from failures, definitely. And a positive attitude, again, as I said. I actually just looked at a few ordinary people who dared to dream and achieved greatness, and I would like to share these with you. And actually, all sectors have got these ordinary people that you actually know about the world over. Michael Jordan is one of those. And these are his quotations, where he says, talent wins games, but teamwork and intelligence wins championships. So talent alone doesn't take you far. It helps. It's a good starting point. But you actually need these other characteristics and also other people to make sure that you succeed. I actually thought this was quite humble and very informative for me, or actually a learning quote that he actually quotes here. If you know how successful Michael Jordan is, actually even the brands that he was able to endorse because of his success on the field, you wouldn't expect that he had so many failures. Actually, I became aware only recently that at the age of 17, while he was still growing, his height was only about 1.8. 1.8 is tall by South African standards, but when it comes to the game that he chose to play, that was short. So he was denied being in the main team at school, but he actually persevered. So it takes more than just talent. Sometimes the talent is not even there maybe, but it's just the ambition and the hard work that really pulls you through. I then looked at, I'm obviously passionate about equity. I wouldn't call it being passionate about women, it's equity, because I really believe people are equal but different, and those differences are their strengths. I looked at the first woman president in Africa, and looking at her journey was quite interesting for me. You wouldn't have thought that she got married at the age of 17. By the age of 21, she had 4 sons. And if you think of that, it's like, okay, her destiny is actually made, that's it. She's actually a child bride, as far as I'm concerned, who actually has 4 kids. But that didn't define who she became. She actually enrolled for a bachelor's degree after her divorce, because she was married to a very abusive husband. And at the age of 33, she had her master's. And she became the vice president of the African Regional Office of the Citibank in Nairobi. And she's now the president of Liberia, as we all know, and the Nobel Peace Prize winner for 2011. That just shows you, I don't know what her dream was, but maybe her dream was just being successful. And she had to go through all these challenges and actually survive them and actually do better than that and thrive. In my worst memories, I get irritated because gender has nothing to do with it. I then go back to my roots and say, I'm just not going to let them win. All my life, I've fought these battles. This was one of the quotations of women that are in the book, Equal but Different, Maria Ramos, who so far is the only woman who is the CEO of one of the big 4. And it's actually interesting when you go through the book, you realize that her social class, she actually came from a working social class. We tend not to talk much about class. Excuse me. And there's a reason for that, because in this country, pre-1994, being black meant you were just a working class. It didn't matter that you had a degree. So the whiteness of Maria would make you think, well, automatically she was actually upper class. And the truth is she wasn't. And she actually overcame all the odds to be where she is. And it's interesting that she applied for a bursary because she couldn't afford going to university. And the bank that she applied for the bursary from was Barclays, and they didn't give bursaries to women. And now she's in charge of Barclays. Isn't that interesting? One of the women I respect is Oprah Winfrey. And one of her, obviously, you've seen that whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Then I thought maybe my journey is quite ordinary, and my dreams were very ordinary, but it wouldn't be complete if I didn't share that with you today. I was obviously directly affected by apartheid. And I was born in Westville in 1959, and it became a white suburb with the Group Areas Act. And I actually went to a school which was called Roy Gopis, and I did grade 1 there, and then they actually demolished the school and they built a road in that. So we had to go and study in a different township, but we continued living in Westville. And the Africans that I saw every day were domestic workers. And interestingly, I didn't see myself as one of them. I aspired for better. I just blogged the Africanness of them, which made me look like me. I just thought I would be different. What informed that? I think it's ambition. I can't think of anything else. And a chance doctor, a visit by a doctor to treat my dad. My dad worked for himself. And maybe that's what informed my aspiration, my ambition, thinking that I could do better. Because though he didn't have education, he worked for himself. He was too proud to be employed by anyone. And he was able to fend for his kids with no education, though I value education, but just hard work and actually working for himself. So he also had this pride that he didn't want to go to hospital or clinics or to doctors' rooms to queue. The doctor came to see him at the house. That helped me. I was 4 at that age. And my mother happened to lose the person that was looking after us. My mother was a primary school teacher. And so I started going to school, not because I was ready, but because she didn't have anyone to take care of me. But when I went to school, I started studying, which I guess helped because, as we now know, early childhood education is good for brain development because you start before the age of 5. So it worked in my favor. So I actually had to remain with my dad to take care of him because he wasn't well, and the doctor came while I was there. And what struck me about this guy, you can imagine in a place like Westville, maybe it's difficult to imagine now, but the blacks that were there were domestic workers and the guys who worked in the garden. And here was this guy wearing a suit, driving a beautiful car. He just oozed authority, and he made my dad better. It didn't matter to me that he was a man because I didn't see gender, I guess, at that age. Maybe you don't at that age. I just thought, I'm going to be this guy no matter what it takes. Learning about hard work from a very young age helped. My parents worked very hard. My mother, actually, she had a father. She came from rural KwaZulu-Natal, and the dad didn't believe that girl kids had to get education because they'll get married, you educate your boys. So she ran away from home. She went to a Catholic mission. That's how she got her education, and she became a primary school teacher. And not just that, she always, the partnership that I saw between my dad and my mother actually informed who I became when I got married. Because in spite of just being a primary school teacher, she supplemented her income. She just worked hard all the time because she wanted to make a similar contribution for the upkeep of the family. So whenever my parents were looking at, because my dad bought property in the few areas where blacks were allowed to buy property, especially Africans. And so they would actually build flats in those properties to rent them out and get annuity income. And my mother and my dad, they would have this conversation. Though I was young, I just remember them talking and saying, so how much do you have? So they would pull money together and build these flats. So I learned from a very young age that as a woman, you actually have a role, not only to raise the kids, if you have them, good for you. Yes, you have to raise them, but also you actually can contribute to the wealth creation, to the upkeep of the family. I'm grateful for that lesson. One of the other things that I learned at the age of 11, I just had breakfast with Prof, like he was saying, and I was laughing. I didn't tell him when he was telling me what he did helping his dad at the age of 9. I'm not surprised that you do what you do now. And at the age of 11, I actually did the cash recon because I used to work at my dad's tuck shop that he ran over weekends. That has actually helped me now running Luminance, amongst other things. Living that work ethic in my life has actually helped me because I am an ordinary person, but just the hard work, the ethic, and also getting married to someone who shares my value system and who shares my work ethic has allowed us to try so many things. And the more things you try, the more it humbles you, because you realize just how much you don't know. Each time you learn something new, you realize that, oh my goodness, I didn't know this. And you learn from everyone that you encounter, especially when you go to the different sectors that I've actually had the luck to get introduced to. It's just shown me that in spite of what you think, you actually don't know as much as you'd like to believe. For me, education is everything, because it has allowed me to become the person that I have. It has allowed me to enjoy life and really live my purpose, if you like. The MPSHB allowed me to do the best things that I could ever ask for. The best time of my life was being a GP in the township, mainly because it was an extension of my family. I love the one-on-one relationship, and talking to so many people is just not my, I don't like doing it, but it has to be done once in a while. But I find it so much easier to actually engage one-on-one, because then there's an exchange of experience, there's an exchange of information, as opposed to you talking to people and never really getting to know what they think, because I think we learn a lot from just getting what the other person thinks, understanding the other person's context. Because when you stand and talk to people, you really don't know their context and you don't know what they think. And it makes you so much richer to actually have that exchange, which I valued in private practice. Then came 1994, best year of my life, because people always think it's about the land, it's about this, it's about that. Yes, all those things are important. But one of the things that was extremely important for me was just dignity. I didn't have dignity pre-1994. I didn't exist as a citizen of my country, and that used to make me so angry. That anger, though, helped me to actually say, no one is going to define who I am and who I'm going to be, and the only way I can fight the system is just being the best that I can, is by making sure that, yes, it's inferior education, Bantu education, but I'll do the best with what I have to become what I want to become. But in 1994, I'm a very impatient person. I remember those long queues. I actually took my kids with me. Since when I went with the kids and joined those queues, because for us, we wanted them to remember for as long as they live. And if I had to spend a day, 2, a week, a month, if I died in that queue, I would die happy, because when I cast that vote, I became human. I became a true African that I always had been, but I was deprived of. So, thank you. So what it did also, for the first time I was like, okay, I've been a GP in the township, I loved it, you know, but that's what I was actually restricted to. One of the things I did was I registered with a company that taught you how to invest on the JSE. I've always been I've just noticed that one of my colleagues is here. One of the things that I've always loved investing. I always knew that financial freedom is what would liberate me. And I always knew it's within me to be able to do that. So I registered for this course on how to invest on the JSE. I had a practice in the township, as I said, and interestingly, they didn't sell the business day. If you remember, I mean, the business day has got all the listings, the different sectors, the closing price, the opening price, and so forth. And part of the studying how to invest, you actually had to have this information. They didn't sell it in the township. So I used to drive during lunchtime to what used to be called the airport. What was the airport then? I'm from Durban originally, so this would have been at the township in Umlazi. The newspaper then was R2.50, but every day I would go Monday to Friday to buy it so that I could understand how you actually choose a company to invest in. Even now, I still have a portfolio that I started then, which was very empowering. Of course, there are many things that I did. One of them was to start a women's group called Wits Women Consortium, and even up to this day, we still have an investment that we invested in at the time. But what this did, which is the beauty of actually leaving your comfort zone and trying other things, because it exposes the gaps in your knowledge. And the beauty with knowing the gaps is that you then fill those gaps. And education for me has always been that filler. So having loved practice the way I did, one day I woke up and I had lost the passion. When it comes to patients, when it comes to a service-related industry, you actually have to love what you do. Otherwise, you actually don't treat your patients or your customers well. So it was time for me to look for something else. Maybe it's because I was affected by crime outside my practice, and maybe because it was at a stage where there was a high prevalence of HIV/AIDS. And at that stage, we didn't know that you might actually treat it as chronic disease, because with the R&D, research and development by pharmaceutical companies, you actually came up with the different types of medication that will actually allow to have a chronic life treatment and live with your HIV. Interestingly, that later on in life, I actually meet Stephen Saad and his team. I invest in their company and I chair the board. And I always say life has a funny way of actually just answering your prayers in a different way. And one of the things that used to make me drive home with a heavy heart, I remember there was this beautiful, beautiful young woman that walked in. At that stage, when you wanted to have life insurance, you had to actually have a HIV test done. And you had to have counseling before. I remember taking the blood, sending it away. She wanted to have a policy with Old Mutual. She had just got a new job. She had a master's. And I had to tell this young, beautiful woman who is ambitious, who has masters, that you know what? We have HIV. And it's up to this day, because I'm not sure if she survived, because it was pre the time that we actually had all the medication that will actually be able to assist you. So anyway, so those are the things I actually suspect that made me lose the love for what I had always loved. But then I've always believed that you can be anything that you choose to be. I wasn't born a doctor, so I could be anything, but it just required me to study. That's how I actually got the privilege, Prof, to study with Wits at the Wits Business School, where I actually specialized in corporate finance, and I was 40. So it was quite a challenge. At 40, you're a medical doctor. There's something about medicine that, especially during those days, maybe it's different 17 years later, but they put you in a box. Just because you're a doctor, you couldn't be anything else in spite of studying. So it was difficult to get a job. But I had done a diploma in occupational health. I see Prof. Dean mention Free State University. Anyway, so I actually then thought, okay, I'll actually do occupational health consulting. But as some of you might know, the shelf life of an MBA is 2 years at most. If you don't use what you've learned, you lose it. So it was important that I find a job, and I wanted to work for an investment bank because I wanted to put deals together, and I needed to understand what makes a good deal a good deal. I used to feel very anxious when I was putting deals together as a Wits Alumni Consortium, because ordinarily it was a big company which is small, unknown, investing in a big white company, and you have a corporate finance person who is always looking for return business. And if, in your view, obviously, if you are looking for return business, big business is more likely to give you return business that's substantial rather than some women's group that has just come to the scene. So I always wondered whose interest is being protected here, where there is a seller and a buyer. And if you don't have the skill, if you don't have the information, you really don't know. You don't understand how it all works. That's why, for me, it was important to learn that, and the investment bank was the best place to be. And I actually was so lucky that a woman by the name of Patsy David, that I was with at business school, introduced me to Richard Boomer, who was the CEO then of corporate finance and advisory. The role of networks, I actually am indebted to them for taking a chance on me. So I learned a lot from that encounter at the bank. And so actually then I started building my business career. I sat on boards, and that allowed me to have networks. in business that exposed me to different sectors of the economy, which I find quite helpful because business is business, but each sector has a different nuance that you can always learn from, and then you grow as a person. So if I was to put the role of education in my life in just one slide, this would be it. It empowered me as a person. It helped me to develop my career. It gave me options. I always believe that there's nothing better than having different options in life, because if you don't have options, then you actually get stuck in doing things that you might not like doing, and also, of course, new networks. Like all lives, there were challenges along the way, and my dad died when I was waiting for my matric results, and it became quite difficult for my mother, who actually had to foot the bill for my education. Bursaries were not easy to come by at the stage, and then I failed at medical school, which wasn't very clever, but anyway, it happens. And in fairness to me, Bantu education didn't prepare you for anything beyond just getting your matric and then be a very eloquent domestic worker. But anyway, the failure at medical school was one of the best things that happened to me, because it taught me humility. If you don't fail in life, I think you then assume there's something special about you, and you think you're better than others, and the truth is you're not, you know. And but it takes failure for you to understand that sometimes. Obviously, the loss of passion was scary. I used to wake up at 12 midnight and think, oh my goodness, if I remove this MBCHB, all I have is a matric, and who's going to employ me, you know. But anyway, I won't go through the last one. If you were to put my life in just one slide, being born, having 8 siblings, going to St. Francis College, where I met my husband. That's quite an achievement. So I got married in 1983, and we got our son in 1984, and in 85 I got my MPCHB. So I actually had 3 certificates by the time I left, which wasn't bad. And then I had the privilege to work in the township, and up to this day, that's my first family before business and my colleagues in business. And I was supposed to achieve this doctorate so long ago. And what motivated it is that as a teenager, I went to a graduation ceremony, and I already wanted to be a doctor, obviously, at that stage. And I go to this graduation ceremony. Those days, you would have 1, at most 3 doctoral students that were graduating. And I got very intrigued. There were so many people with the black academic attires, and then there were these 3. So I was intrigued. Okay, there has to be something special. They had these red academic attires. But not only that, you know, when the other degrees, as you know, when they are called, you just get called, you get the capping, and you know. But when it starts with the doctoral students or graduates, everyone stops, they read a dissertation, and it just looked so elegant, and it looked different. And obviously I am very vain, I guess, so I wanted that. So the medical degree was like, just get me closer to this real thing. So that's why, but can you imagine, I was a teenager, I only got it in 2014, and the reason for that is it just felt so selfish, which I guess is so typical of women, because you're raising your kids, you know, you're supporting your husband, you're trying to create wealth. And if you actually then do a doctorate, and it's a lot of work, I've never worked this hard, it just feels so selfish. What it then did, because I thought I can't work this hard and not produce anything that would be of help to anyone, because with your thesis, it really goes to shelf 13. No one reads it, at least if you are not an academic prof. That's how I see it. And then one of the things I realized as I entered business is that when we ventured, and when I say we, I mean my peers, we ventured into business, we didn't have role models that we could sit across the table and say, how do you maneuver this? Have you had a challenge similar to this? How can you help? And I've actually got, like most of you would have, requests from younger girls and boys who actually just want to know, how can you mentor me? How can you help me to maneuver through life, which is full of challenges? And then I thought, what an opportunity, because I've actually said no to so many because time is not recyclable and you have a limited amount of time while you chase these many things that we chase. And I thought, if you put something in a book, it allows you to reach people that you'll never meet in real life. So you actually allow for this reservoir of information from so many leaders from all over the world, where someone would actually get inspiration from reading, and also just tips about business, about life. So that informed what is equal but different that will be launching at end of the month. Obviously, I've learned so many lessons in business that talent and capital is so important. And business partnerships are actually very important and priceless, and they are like a marriage. In my view, if you don't share a similar value system, don't go there, because it's not going to work. It's not a sustainable relationship. A culture trumps strategy, a culture that allows people to be inquisitive, a culture that allows people to try even if they fail, they are supported. And a culture that embraces being different, a culture that embraces diversity. One of the women that I interviewed for the book is the UN Women Executive Director, our previous Deputy President, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, who says there is no substitute for depth and time. And I truly agree. And you acquire depth through learning, through education, in my view. Her story is also quite interesting because she was a school teacher before she went into politics, and but she says she wanted so much to have a doctorate that even during the time when she was in politics, she wouldn't accept these honorary doctorates. She said, I want to have my own first, then I'll accept the honorary doctorates. It's hard to beat a person who never gives up, and that's true. And I see myself as one of those people who just never give up. And get comfortable with being outside your comfort zone, because that's when you'll grow. When you think you know it all, you have it all, then you just stay exactly where you are and you don't grow as a person. As indicated earlier on, limits exist only in the mind. And strength, and here I don't mean by physical strength, I mean resilience and just strength in so many ways. Emotionally, it doesn't come from what you can do, it comes from overcoming the things you once thought you couldn't. And hard work beats talent anytime, I agree. But one of the other things is that in your life, when you want to fulfill those dreams, there's so many other people that make it possible. In my case, it's my domestic worker who actually helped me to raise my kids because I couldn't do it on my own. It's my husband who believed in my dreams and supported me. It's my kids who did the right thing and allowed me to be happy. And a lot of other people that I've encountered in my life, including those that mentored me. I have a challenge to leaders and parents in the room. I want to start with a quotation by Ngozi Adichie. We say, you can have ambition, but not too much. You should aim to be successful, but not too successful. Otherwise, you'll threaten the man. It's funny, but it's not. This is what we tell our girl child all the time, subtly, overtly. And I always ask this. If you were a commander-in-chief in war and you had 100 soldiers, 52 of them were told, don't do too well, because otherwise you'll threaten the 48. And when it came to rewards, you actually paid them 23% less. Would you win that war? Do we think it's going to be different in real life and in business? Of course it's not. So what we do currently, globally, they tend to think and say Africa is a patriarchal society. The whole world is patriarchal. Maybe the Scandinavian countries have done better than most, and it hasn't been automatic. It's been through quotas. It's actually an active process that has to be done. I also like this quote by Sir Philip Hampton, who also is in the book. He says, we educate extremely clever and able women to a very high standard, and then we tend to have limited expectations of their future contribution. And as long as when we raise our girl child, we tell her to be less because she has to get married and have kids, and for her to be able to achieve that, she mustn't be a threat to the husband. And we say to our boy child, you have to do better than your sister, and you actually have to provide for your family. We're shortchanging ourselves and the generation that come because we're being unfair to the boy. Why should he be the sole provider? Why should he see himself as having to beat other people? The message that we should be getting to our kids, to our colleagues, to the people that work for us, is to say, be the best that you can be. You don't have to beat anyone but yourself. And if we say that, then this world will be so much better. And we won't have the problems that we have in the world of so much, I'm forgetting the word, that's the beauty about aging. But you actually have the Brexits of this world, the Donald Trumps of this world. In my view, at least, it's just because of the gap between those who have and those who haven't. And one of the main things is because we're not utilizing all the resources that we have equally and efficiently. Thank you.